Hello and welcome back to Tracking Trends. Today we will be looking at regulation of online gaming in India. The government last week released a set of draft rules following the enactment of a law on August 22, which was titled the Promotion and Regulation of Online Gaming Act 2025. We have Vedika Pandey, an expert on the subject, to tell us about the impact of these rules on the industry and consumers. Before I go over to Vedika, a gentle reminder once again, please subscribe to our channel, press the bell button so that you get notified every time we have a new show. You can also read a summarized version of this conversation on BasisPointInsight.com. The link is given in the description. Welcome to our show, Vedika. Thanks for taking time out. Now, a word about Vedika. Vedika is a young lawyer. She is a researcher. She's a senior associate with Koan Advisory, which is a tech policy consulting firm based in New Delhi. A little over a year ago, Vedika authored a report arguing the case for a model law on online betting and gambling. So I couldn't have found a better person to explain the new rules that have been notified just this past week than Vedika. Vedika, take it off from here and just tell us. Let's begin by seeing from the time the law was enacted and now that the rules have been notified, what are the changes? What are the concerns that have been addressed? And if there are some new surprises.
Thank you, Rajesh, for having me, first of all. It's a pleasure. To start with, the Act came out in August, was passed by the Parliament and received the President's assent in August, on 22nd August, and became an Act. What the Act does is that it creates three types of online games. One is online real money gaming. The other is social games, or which are or often commonly known as casual games. And one is esports. The Act prohibits the former, the first one, and the latter two. It seeks to regulate and promote and create a registration framework for. Now, I think to begin with, we should give out a distinction of what these three different types of online games mean and what they entail. Now, online real money gaming is a construct that has come about because of a lot of jurisprudence by the Supreme Court and various high courts. These games involve an aspect of placing stakes with real money in an online game with the expectation of winning. But the reason why there is a difference between online real money gaming and what we colloquially understand to be gambling is because online real money gaming involves a certain amount of skill that sets it apart from gambling, which is largely determined by chance. An online game of skill is largely determined by skill, on the other hand. Examples would include things like poker, where, yes, there is a hand that you get, and there is some amount of chance that comes out of there being a shuffle and it being randomized. But at the end of the day, it's the player's skill that determines whether or not they're going to win. Other examples include fantasy sports or rummy. These are the games that have been, judicially affirmed as real money games or games of skill. Esports includes a simulation of sorts of any real life game. For instance, a very popular video game called FIFA is considered esports. There is an NBA version which is available online. There is chess, which people play, that can be considered esport. And the third game, which is social games or casual games, would include all your role-playing games, your video games, things like The Last of Us, and a bunch of other popular, video games. Now, the Act, like I said, prohibits online real money games and seeks to establish a registration framework for the other two. When I say it prohibits online real money game, it also prohibits any other kind of promotion, advertisement, allowing other people to, or facilitating that gameplay. On top of that, the Act establishes an online gaming authority, which is a central nodal
We'll,
authority
we'll, we'll,
responsible.
we'll, we'll come to those provisions later. So, first of all, just to get it clear, up until the time this act came into being, we had no such regulations, right?
No,
There was no ban on online gambling.
um, that's arguable because online gambling was a state subject, and there were various states that had
Some
prohibited it.
states
Various
did have.
states, yeah,
Some states did have, but we had this argument going on that is it a game of skill or is it a game of chance?
yes, that's correct.
This
Yeah,
this debate came up while deciding how you want to tax them, right?
that's
Uh,
correct. Yeah,
so this debate was going on. So now this act makes it very clear that any kind of gambling online or any kind of betting online is today illegal in India, whether it is done by an onshore company or whether it is done by an offshore company. Am I right?
yeah, yeah.
And
Just to add some minor nuance there, the Act basically clarifies that regardless of the degree of chance involved, you are prohibited.
yeah, so there is no gray area involved there. So
Yeah,
long as money is involved, it's banned, right?
correct. Yeah,
And anybody who violates, there is a penalty of up to 1 crore and
yeah,
or 3 years imprisonment, right? And
that's correct.
this extends not only to companies which might indulge in offering these services uh, or hosting these games, but it also applies to any entity which is promoting this through an advertisement or any kind of campaign. So
That's
that
correct.
is something which is done. And I think there is very little debate over that. There is by and large a kind of consensus, or are there still differences within the industry as to how you should go about it?
About the prohibition on real money games,
Yeah. Yeah.
there is a huge debate about whether or not the government should have done this. I will classify those concerns into two buckets. The first bucket will be on whether or not the center even had jurisdiction to do what it has done, where once you say that all forms of gaming online are prohibited because there is an element, and regardless of an element of chance, regardless of the degree that it involves chance in, you might be overstepping onto the state's power to legislate on gambling and betting, which falls under the state list under the Constitution. And the second argument within the which can be used to challenge the Act's constitutionality is that this is a business that was running on legitimate expectations that were given by the state. So the state has been taxing this sector. The state has been giving promises to this sector in terms of how India wants to be a powerhouse when it comes to online gaming. And on the back of those promises, these gaming companies, investors in gaming companies, and users have been using these services for years now. Now, for the center to sort of flip the switch, sorry, and to prohibit them was kind of not expected. So, a very solid argument can be made um, for it being a violation of the fundamental right to trade and business. The second concern that scholars and non-industry stakeholders have been raising is that when the inherent thing with addiction is that people find avenues to access those services. Now, when you
Mm-hmm.
prohibit them, and the reason why you have prohibited them is because you want to prevent addiction and prevent offshore gaming entities, offshore gambling entities from, abusing Indian users. What will end up happening is that these Indian users will end up accessing these services elsewhere. And where will they access it? They will access it with unregulated offshore platforms, which are not answerable to the Indian government, right? Because they will continue to provide these services regardless of the prohibition. And a case in point is, for instance, similar alcohol prohibitions. Addictive substances, when they're prohibited, there are various studies that suggest that the alcohol prohibition in the state of Bihar, for instance, did not really do what it was meant to do, which was to prevent domestic violence. And in similar fashion, here, addiction will not be dealt with under a prohibitive regime.
Right. Right. So, I mean, yeah. So it's the same kind of argument, or the philosophical or ethical or economic debate that raises on prohibition and other things that kind of extends to this as well. Uh, in
Yeah.
your experience, how have other countries addressed this problem? What is the kind of practice in more developed countries like the United Kingdom, Australia, which is a federal structure, United States, which is again a federation? What have been done there, and is there something that India can learn, or has have there been learnings that have been incorporated into this enactment?
So, no, to start with. Um, when I was researching for the report that you were earlier mentioning about a model law that is enacted by the state, I found that all of the examples that you have cited, the US is a slightly different case because it is very state heavy. Legislation there is very state heavy. But even the more advanced states where gambling is more commonly used, like in Nevada, or in Europe, or in Australia even, and my study extended to other countries within Europe also, the Philippines, some other Southeast Asian countries. What these countries do is that instead of prohibiting, they will establish a central authority, much like our government has done, except the role of that authority will be a licensing regime, and they will issue licenses to legitimate operators, and those legitimate operators will in turn be answerable to that authority in terms of what kind of consumer protection measures they are following, what kind of anti-money laundering measures, because there is money involved, and that is a very legitimate concern as well. They will have to have some robust know your customer procedures, like in India, banks, for instance, are required to do because they're also dealing with money. And those licensing regimes are fairly strict in nature as well. Your license can be revoked, your license can be suspended upon wrongdoing. But yeah, they have taken the regulation and consumer protection route as opposed to the prohibitive stance that the Indian government has taken.
Hmm. Is it? I mean, can it be argued that these countries are very different? Their economic setting is very different. The level of education, awareness, the legal systems, efficacy of the legal systems are much more robust. I mean, because the Indian case may be a little different. I mean, you started off saying that India is seen as a hub of future growth engine for online gaming. I was kind of looking up the data. Depending on which source you want to believe, there are from the number of online gamers in India range from 400 million to 600 million. Is that correct?
That's
So,
correct. The most,
I mean 40 crore to 60 crore people in a country with a population of 140 crore, where almost 80 crore people, we are told, have to depend on free food from government. I mean, they still have smartphones, some of them, and they still play games. I mean, this is a bizarre situation, and this market has been growing very fast. And there is a government official. I came across a news report in Times of India quoting a government official who said apparently almost 20,000 crore was lost by these gamers in 1 year alone last year. And 20,000 crore is a huge amount of money being lost by some 45 crore or 50 crore people who are playing these games. Is there a case that India is very different, and we needed to do this? We needed to actually go for the prohibition route because going for regulation won't have been effective. What's your own take?
Um, again, if you don't mind, I will answer your question in three parts. The first being that, yes, you're very right in pointing out that the Indian context is very different as opposed to the UK, where, for instance, a UK gambling commission can exist and regulate and license gambling operators. But that does not mean that there is no middle ground between what the UK is doing and a complete prohibition. The way I see it, in my personal opinion, how it should have been was that instead of there being a central, delegated regulator, it should have been that the center creates this sort of bare bones structure of a framework and allows states, given their social norms and given their cultural requirements, for them to have their own licensing regime with minor tweaks being made to the bare bones structure provided by the government. And that, I think, would have dealt with the differing social contexts, that we are a very diverse nation, and the differing social contexts could have been, at least to start with, we could have tried to meet them with that middle ground that I view this should have been like, instead of a complete prohibition. Um, the second answer that I will, the second point that I wanted to make was that often we use the number of 400, and some studies say 450 million, some studies say 480 million number of Indian users as you know, wow, that's scary, because those many people are playing these games, and that is the amount of money that is at stake. But the nuance that's getting lost here very often is that all those studies actually peg the number of real money gamers to be somewhere around 150 million. Now, I'm not at all saying that that's a small number, but
That's a very big number.
um, that is still a very big number, but it is still not as scary as 450 million users. And that's not the biggest argument. But again, the losses that also you're citing here of the the 20,000 crore um, being lost by Indian users, that was specific to offshore gambling operators that anyway now do not, have, they're not obligated to abide by the central government's regulations in any case. So what will now end up happening is that these entities sitting in Malta or Curacao or wherever else will continue to offer these services. And on the very important social question of how, in a country where poverty is so prevalent and people are finding it hard to afford food, um, how are we losing so much? How can we afford to lose so much money to online games? A nuance that often gets lost also with prohibitive regimes is that um, the people that suffer the most will actually be the poor people, because the rich will have the awareness to know which entity has consumer protection measures, which entity offering them gambling options or gaming options with real money will have a random number generator, which is a very technical thing, but it basically what it does is that it ensures that the game that you're playing is completely actually random and you're not playing against the system or the bot, or any other consumer protection measure, like even a grievance redressal mechanism within the platform. The rich will be able to tell that, hey, because digital literacy and how well off you are in society are correlated. So they will, and it's as simple as knowing what a VPN is. That's all it takes for you to be able to, rely on a legitimate service. Whereas a person with not that much digital literacy or not that much money will actually suffer the most. And again, taking us back to the Bihar example, right? Through their private networks, the rich will know where to procure their legitimate liquor, but the poor will all often fall in the hands of someone that gives them spurious liquor. And that's how
Mm.
medical emergencies come by. I know that the dangers associated with both are very different in degree, but the parallel still stands that in a prohibitive regime, the person that suffers the most is the poor person.
I mean, if you want to really look for the closest physical parallel, is that the largest number of buyers of lottery tickets are actually the poor, not the rich.
Yeah,
So there is, because the poor live on the hope that
yeah,
something happens and they can be pulled out of poverty. That eternal hope is what drives them. Yes, so it's not just the loss of money or harm that kind of has prompted the government to come up with this regulation. There are certain other arguments also, which is about terrorism, money laundering.
Right? Yeah.
How real are those threats, and how exactly they kind of they are done using these platforms?
These are very, very real concerns. Money laundering, not just in India but internationally, is a huge concern when it comes to online gaming that involves money, or what is abroad known as gambling. Um, in India also, there have been several instances where gaming operations being run by sometimes Indian individuals, sometimes individuals located outside India. What they do is they will take money through mule accounts that are often registered with grocery stores or your kirana dukans or your pan shops or your cigarette shops. And that money is often then layered, or it'll be in such small amounts that it can't attract the attention of an enforcement authority. Then that gets transferred into a digital wallet, or it gets converted into some kind of virtual asset, and then it gets transferred outside India. Often these entities also offer cash services, which has been illegal even under the IT rules, the 2023 amendments relating to gaming. And although that never came into force. But yeah, that is the way they operate, and they do accept cash, they accept UPI transactions that are not registered in their own real names, and then they basically layer these transactions in a very surreptitious way.
But these also, as you argued, these also can be addressed through effective regulation rather than prohibition, right? There are
Yes,
ways
that's
to
correct.
address them through effective regulation. What about terrorism? What about terrorist organizations using online gaming platform to recruit, training, and kind of conditioning people mentally? The script of these games. Uh,
So,
they can
Rajesh, the
also
thing
be
is,
addressed. I mean, I'm saying,
sorry.
can they also be addressed through regulation rather than prohibition?
So, I I understand that money laundering and terror financing often go hand in hand when it comes to regulation, and that's how other countries have also dealt with it. But I haven't come across any credible studies that have been carried out on the numbers in which this is happening through Indian platforms or for Indian users. But yes, there is a way of, once you have robust security mechanisms for know your customer procedures, or how your money flow needs to happen, in what way you need to account for user funds, etc. Once there is tracing of your money, terror financing concerns can also be dealt with, and that's how it's done outside of India as well. When it comes to user exchanges or user generated content on platforms, the thing is, a prohibition does not deal with that also, because what you're citing right now, for instance, is grooming or um, recruitment through these online platforms, through conversations on these online platforms. That is very prevalent with video games as well. It's just
Yeah.
that there's no money involved there, right?
Yeah.
And when you are regulating, so for instance, in Europe, all user generated content on a gaming platform needs to follow a set of guidelines as well, much like our OTT platforms in India. It needs to have similar, like, content declarations or age related restrictions. So once you regulate it in that proper a manner, I would imagine that user generated content raising concerns of the sort that you are citing can be dealt with.
Hmm. So, I mean, that's the money game part that you have kind of really explained it in a very lucid fashion. Now, let's move on to esports and social gaming. and which will be registered, unlike real money games which now stand banned. Now, the new rules that have come up, they kind of tell you about how they will be regulated, the setting up of an online gaming authority. Take us through all of that and tell us, what are the provisions that you're fine with, what are the provisions that may need some attention or a review, and and are there some surprises?
So, surprises, not per se, because this was expected. This is essentially what the regulator had said. One big surprise that I will actually come to it once I'm done establishing the broader structure of what the regulation does. So, okay. So the regulation sets up the rules set up the authority that is responsible for regulating on online gaming and registering esports and social games. Um, the authority can do this by its own volition or upon request by a gaming operator. The authority not only has the power to register gaming entities, but it also has the power to suspend or cancel a gaming entity's registration upon there being a wrongdoing or a violation of their license to operate, essentially. It follows the same structure of penalties and violations as the Act, which is that these offenses do not require a warrant and they are not bailable. They, like you earlier very correctly pointed out, there is a scope for a 3-year imprisonment and a huge fine of 1 crore rupees. The rules also establish a user grievance redressal mechanism where if a user has a problem with something, a consumer protection measure, for instance, on the platform, they can raise that concern with the platform. Then, if they continue to have that grievance, they can reach out to the grievance appellate body that was established under the IT rules in 2021. And if they still want to appeal that, they can appeal against the central authority that has been established for registration of esports and social games. One concern that was raised before when the act came out was that what happens to user funds that are already with us? So banks and financial institutions were raising questions about what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to immediately reverse all these transactions? Because that will, like we pointed out, there are so many Indian users that will entail a huge compliance burden on not just gaming operators, but also banks and financial institutions. So the rules clarify a 180-day period, and that was mostly the advocacy by gaming companies as well, that we need a grace period of for fund reversal to users. And the rules sort of deal with that, and they say that okay, fine, you get this 180-day period to reverse all the funds. In terms of key concerns or takeaways that I have from the rules, one big surprise that jumps out is the definition of online game service providers.
Mhm.
Um, and I will read this out to you. So, the service provider definition includes anyone who offers, operates, organizes, manages, or makes available an online game. Ideally, the regulations as the act as we understood them was only to regulate the gaming operators themselves, right? Now, when you say anyone that makes available an online game, this goes beyond those, traditionally what we understand as gaming operators, and it will include things like app stores, for instance, which
Mm.
includes your Apple App Store or your Google Play. It will include cloud gaming service providers, like, for instance, Xbox has a cloud gaming service called Xbox Cloud Gaming, or Amazon has Luna. It will include online gaming stores like Steam, and it will also include, for instance, online game developers and distribution entities like Nintendo or like Ubisoft. Now, here's the problem, right? Your definition of online game service providers, which you say are required to register with the gaming authority, is so broad. And upon failure of that registration, you attract criminal penalties. But who
Mm.
is supposed to register? These gaming service providers are all involved. When I am playing a game sitting here on my PlayStation, or potentially two or more of these entities are involved. So are they supposed to each register? Are they supposed to collectively register? And if they fail to register, they attract criminal penalties. So a risk averse startup, which is legitimately risk averse, may stop hosting games in India altogether at
Mm,
worst. And at best, the case will be that they will have to have a separate product on for their offerings in India, right? They like an app store will
mm,
have to have a separate compliance regime and fragment the Indian product from the product that is available everywhere else in India, everywhere else in the world. So your best case scenario is that the Indian market gets separated from the rest of the world. And your worst case scenario is that people will be too risk averse to offer their services in India
mm, mhm.
because the
So,
smallest thing will,
yeah, so these are draft rules, and it's open for public feedback up until October
yeah,
31st.
yeah,
And one can expect that some of these very online service providers who are going to be affected, that you said, are definitely going to lobby the government with this. So there
yeah,
is an window of opportunity to address this. But if
yeah,
this does get addressed, it does have a kind of a not so positive effect on the industry,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, how do
And
you? Yeah. So sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
sorry, just very briefly, I have two or three more concerns that I wanted to just lay out, if that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Please.
So, aside from this, there are very common monetization models that gaming entities use, which also technically get prohibited once the rules come into effect, if through consultation these concerns are not removed. Where, for instance, there are things like, you can buy skins, you can buy weapons, you can buy different things on even the most common video games.
Hmm.
Sometimes these result from a loot box, where a loot box is essentially you give some money to a gaming entity and you say, surprise me. And they can give you any skin, they can give you any weapon. It's your luck whether it's good or bad. That gets prohibited. That's a very common marketing model that gaming entities often end up having. So they will also have to fragment their Indian product. And the last concern that I wanted to point out was a little more procedural, which is that you see, the gaming authority is responsible for holding the fate of gaming companies in India for whether or not they are legitimate esport or not. Um, but they don't have any technical experts on board. They only have bureaucrats. And that often ends up being um, very difficult because for them to understand monetization models that games follow, which by the way evolve very quickly,
Absolutely.
they would have to be in touch with how the gaming mechanics are working. They would have to be in touch with how monetization models are evolving, and for them to hold for a bunch of bureaucrats to be holding the fate of a gaming company can become difficult for them to actually understand without a gaming expert on board. Although the rules do allow that it is at their discretion to seek advice from a gaming expert, they're under no compulsion to do so. And even if I, as a gaming company, apply for a license to operate in India and I don't get that license, the most I can do is appeal to another authority that is established by the rules, and that is also a bureaucrat. That is actually the secretary at MeitY, and that just delays my process further, right? I am unable to go to the court. I'm waiting for 30 or however many days, because these appellate bodies are not bound by any timelines technically for grievances being raised by gaming companies. So I'm just waiting indefinitely. My money is caught up. I am, suffering from reputational harm, and I'm not able to approach the court because my appeal is technically caught with bureaucracy. Now, what this is a problem because increasingly the burden of compliance is shifting onto the companies. The burden of ensuring that an industry operates in a kosher manner is shifting to companies, and we see the state um, sort of receding into more of an audience position. And that is a problem because that goes against the very grain of the ease of doing business promise, right? When the government has been saying for these many years that India will become a net exporter when it comes to gaming, when regulation is this compliance heavy, it goes against that promise to a large extent.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. India is the second largest market in terms of user, and third largest in terms of revenues involved,
Yeah.
after China and US. So yes, there are concerns, and in fact, I was going to come to this point of the composition of the online gaming authority, and this is where we actually always end up having problem. So we're going to have officials from MITI, the Ministry
Yeah.
of Information Technology. We are going to have officials from the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, and we know the kind of people who are associated with Ministry of Youth and Sports, Youth Affairs and Sports. They're way, way, way away from anything digital, uh, and so are in many ways bureaucrats. And then there are going to be representatives of a few financial authorities. So you're very right. The speed with which the digital landscape keeps changing, and this has been actually a problem with larger policy making when it comes to the digital economy in India, because we do have a lot of people in the government who have very little understanding of all things digital, and when things are changing so rapidly, uh, coming up with policies that more often than not hinder the growth of different sectors, and that's a real concern. And the way this bill has been structured, while the concerns are legitimate, the remedy that is sought risks, crossing the thin line that lies between regulation and control. So there are risks. More than regulating the online gaming industry, we might end up in a situation of control over the online gaming industry. And in today's day and time, control doesn't really help you in the longer run. What we need is regulation, informed regulation, effective regulation, and regulation that is done with uh, reasonable stakeholder
Yeah.
consensus, and that's when it works. And we can only hope that the few weeks that are left before the October 31 deadline comes, there will be constructive feedback, and there will be positive response from the government to address some of these loopholes. Uh, and that said, it's an ongoing process. Things keep changing, things keep getting fine tuned. But thank you very much for telling our audience about a very complex set of legislation in such a simple, engaging style, Vedika. We hope to have you back again. Thank you very much again. And a gentle reminder to our audience once again, do not forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed to my channel. Press the bell button so that you will get notified every time we have a new show, and keep coming back. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Rajesh.